boardroom. This is the business of esports. As the prophet of esports, I rely on trustworthy and meaningful data every day. Data from our research partner YouGov offers the most complete view of esports fans and gamers in the world, providing context to who they are, what they think, the brands they buy, and things they do. YouGov's connected insights and research services inform strategy at every level. If you're a team, a brand, agency, or rights holder, you should be talking with YouGov. Their partners measure and maximize ROI and are telling compelling stories with data. Visit yougov.com/gaming-esports to learn more. From the keyboard to the boardroom, this is the Business of Esports weekly news show / post podcast live stream. I am Paul Dewalimi. I'm joined today by my friends and co-hosts, Lindsay the Boss Poss, Jimmy Mondel, Jeff the Juice Cohen, and Jimmy Barada. For those of you who are new, welcome to the official weekly news show of esports. What we do here is we cover everything that didn't make it into the podcast, all the news and topics of the week. We look at all of it through a business suite and C-suite lens. We dissect, we analyze the business implications of everything happening in the industry. But the best part about the live stream is we get to do it live with you guys. You get to interact, ask questions. I know so many of you are lurking. You're welcome to do that too, but we encourage you to get involved, ask questions. It makes the show that much more fun and that much better. And we appreciate all of you being here. How is everyone doing this week? Lindsay, let's start with you.
Oh, it's been such a great week. The weather has been so beautiful. So I've been taking a lot of long walks with my dog. So I'm just like in a great mood.
This is not gaming news.
I know.
Starting with the weather, Lindsay, come on. Come on, let's be a little more live. This is going to be a great show. I love Chris is already on his game. That's a pretty hilarious comment. We got Goyo.
Goyo says hello. Chris says drinking game time. Toss one back every time you hear metaverse. Eat a bagel when someone says Roblox. Chris, I don't think William's going to be here for the live stream today, so no bagels. I think for anyone.
The bagel part though, there was more like. Instead of drinking games, bagel games, I would be.
You would be more into.
Yeah, very into bagel games.
I am going to purposely say Roblox just to see how many bagels Chris can eat. If this is the this is the game. Goyo says, "Sorry, it's been a while. 5:30 is a common time for Rocket League scrims. Unfortunately, Goyo, I'm sorry to hear that. But welcome regardless, and appreciate it. Even if." We always appreciate if people watch after the fact. If you can't make it live, that's okay too. All this content goes up on YouTube and as a podcast everywhere you get our podcast. So Apple Podcasts, Google Play, everywhere else if you prefer to listen to it or if it's easier to listen to it. How's everyone else doing? Jimmy, Jeff, Jimmy?
Good. Played a little bit of the new Call of Duty. It's much better than the old one, but that's not saying a lot. It's the same old. You know, if you like Modern Warfare, you'll like this new one because it's the same engine as that one, and you know it's the same developer behind it. So little tweaks, a little bit different than the Cold War edition of the game, Treyarch Studio. But overall, not too different, but good changes. But it's just a frustrating experience. You download the game, then you have to sit for 30 more minutes and let the shaders install, and then you get to play the game, and then you get kicked out because there's a playlist update, and then it's like, oh, we need you to restart your game. You hop back into the game. Oh, there's more shaders. Look at that. Oh,
I mean, the shader thing.
About the hackers.
The shader thing is a true COD like exclusive. I feel like
there's so many great games on this planet. Not a single other one I have to install shaders for.
Why can't they do that as part of the general game install process?
Yeah, take 5 extra minutes. Just don't tell me about it. Like, I don't have to know it's happening. Like,
well, here's the question for Jeff and Jimmy, because Jimmy, I didn't ask you on the podcast. well, I sort of asked you, but one of the conversations we had on the podcast, which I will tease, we had two guys. We had Tyler and Luke from Esports Arena. So Tyler's the CEO, Luke's their chief sales officer. Amazing podcast, talked about Esports Arena, them getting into Walmart. Even got into their hardware, the overpowered line of laptops and desktops. Like, great conversation around their business, what they've learned over the last basically 15 years they've been in the business. But one of the things I asked at the end was, we have COD that came out this week, we have Battlefield next week, and then we have Halo first week of December.
Yeah.
How does this all, and Jeff, I'll ask you this, how do you think this all ends up sort of shaking out from a sales perspective, or from a meets, exceeds, or falls below expectations perspective?
Good question. I think, Call of Duty is going to do well. I'm sure Call of Duty will sell the most, but that's kind of like the obvious answer, because they'd be the, if we were talking in betting parlance, they'd be pretty heavy favorite. Also to note with Halo is going to do incredibly well as well, but that it's not going to be perfect data that we'll get in terms of sales, because we obviously know that Microsoft is trying to drive a lot of adoption with Game Pass. So, they might say, hey, this many accounts played it, but we don't know how many accounts actually bought it versus played it on Game Pass, which to Microsoft's perspective doesn't matter, but it won't probably be perfect kind of comp to typical sales. And I actually think Battlefield will do well also. I mean, the reviews I think have been pretty good. I know, Paul, you've said you're pretty jacked up for that one, so I think they'll all do pretty well. I think. I know that's a little bit of a cop-out answer, but COD will probably sell the most. Cop-out answer. Relative.
So you think no one?
I'll take Battlefield to be the best relative to expectations, but COD will sell the most.
I think I might even go further and to iterate on that. Like, I think Vanguard might do worse than last year's COD, and I think Halo will do better, and I think Battlefield will do better than their previous iterations. Like, I think that those are the trends, but talking raw numbers, it's going to sell the most COD. Like, it's COD.
The Vanguard discussion is hard because the COD titles are really just a vehicle to sell skins and weapon packs for the free-to-play version. The only reason why anyone bought Black Ops was because the Black Ops guns in Warzone were overpowered. They were by far the best guns to use in the Battle Royale mode, so you would get Black Ops to level them up and then use them in Warzone. So, the COD activations are such garbage. Like, I saw a Judge Dredd one. They're still pushing the Die Hard one. They did a Scream one, which was kind of funny to see people running around in the Scream outfits. But
I've seen so many of those Scream outfits too. That's why I know they made so much money off that low lift activation. I'm just no one put any effort into this, and they just made so much money.
It's a bunch of stuff that would have been cool in like 2006, honestly.
Right. The quality of the skin too. It was just like, what is this dog? Yeah. Like, what? It's so bad.
Yeah. To Jeff's point, Battlefield has an awesome, loyal, I think, fan base. I've heard a lot of the trash talk. I've seen a lot of the gameplay, and on social media, people are definitely praising it. So, it's just interesting because none of them are really on the same level of one another, I don't think. I think they're all competing against their best or worst versions of themselves. And so, with that in mind, I think COD is going to underperform. I think Battlefield will overperform greatly. And I think Halo will be lucky to make a splash because it's been so long. That's really a strong nostalgia.
That's a hot take, Jimmy.
That is a hot take.
It's a very hot take.
Well, you heard it.
I like
that.
It here. You're choosing. I appreciate that.
Jeffrey says it only counts if it's New York bagels. Jeffrey, sure.
Jeff.
Montreal bagels, number one. New York bagels, two.
No,
if I had to.
Bagel snobs. I will accept
Long
McDonald's
Island
bagels.
Have you ever been to Long Island?
What's
Long
that?
Island bagels. That's what
I said. I'll eat a McDonald's bagel if it means getting a bagel.
Oh no!
You don't need to be
Okay.
highbrow about this.
All right, guys. Let's. I will just say one thing before we move on. On the COD Battlefield sort of Halo discussion, I was surprised to see almost very few streamers have been streaming the new COD, right? Like XQC played it a little bit on stream, but I didn't see a whole lot of play, and I don't know how much that translates to sales, right? It'll be interesting to see. but I think the minutes streamed and viewed for COD this year seems very low, anecdotally. I don't know what the numbers will bear out, but anecdotally seems very low. I will say one thing that seemed way more popular was the new Forza. You have every streamer under the sun buying a racing wheel to do Forza.
There's a new racing meta too. Freaking what's his face? Summit is getting into sim racing, and there's people competing now in Assetto Corsa leagues and on Twitch. I'm like, what is happening? This is great. This is a great time. But yeah, it's really exciting, to be honest.
I wonder how much of a bite that takes out of sort of the new FPS games. I don't know, because there definitely seems to be this racing meta, Jimmy, to your point, that's happening. But
there's also like a lot of sponsored streams with these Amazon published games, like lots of sponsored New World streams still, and lots of sponsored Lost Ark streams I've been seeing. Like I know Shroud's been on that game as well. So I wonder, like all these games coming out at this moment in time, like it's crazy. It's good for the consumer, obviously, but it's crazy.
It's terrible in the sense that like there's no games for like 10 months and then all the games all at once, right? Like, Jeff, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, so is Amazon now paying people to play New World? Because I thought the whole thing at the beginning was like they didn't need that. So it's interesting.
I haven't seen sponsored
maybe
streams.
The game is not doing as well as maybe.
I think they've been doing that for a while, because like I think the like their marketing tactic was that they had specific streamers go to specific servers, and then they had their fan bases fill those servers up. So that was their initial tactic, and now they're still doing that, but it's less so.
I don't think they're paying streamers though, because I haven't seen that. And Shroud streams a lot. Grims I know streams a lot, and I don't think either of them are sponsored streams. But I may be wrong. Chris says lots of Lost Ark keys distributed this week. Yeah, that's I don't think Lost Ark's going to make such a big splash, but who knows, right? It's I just haven't seen a whole ton of buzz around it. I know I got a key and I haven't tried it yet. I know Shroud's playing it today or as we speak. But that'll be interesting to see, because the MMO crowd market's getting crowded also. All right, guys, we have so much news to get to, and I will say literally half the stories are Riot stories. So buckle up for like a ton of Riot news. It seems Riot really dominated the news cycle in the last week. And let me start with a relatively easy one, and we're going to get sort of progressively deeper here. But the first story here is it's an article from Dexerto, and the headline here is Riot in talks with Olympic leadership about League of Legends esports future. So supposedly there's a rumor, and Riot has confirmed this rumor, that there's an ongoing conversation between the company and Olympic leadership about the potential for League of Legends to appear as a medal event at the Olympics. I'm curious what you guys think of this. Correct me if I'm wrong, but this feels like the first time we've seen a major esport, a major publisher, confirm that they are actually talking to the Olympics.
I mean, does this not
Lindsay, go ahead.
Does this not make so much sense, though? The success of Worlds this past week alone should just tell a story to the Olympic Committee that this is easily a way to integrate with gaming and makes a lot of sense.
I mean, do you think that's what's driving this? And you've sort of preempted the other story here I wanted to bring up, but I'll bring it up now, which is Worlds 2021. This is League of Legends World Championship. Hits 4 million peak viewers, a new record for League of Legends esports. Now, this excludes the Chinese platforms. What's interesting is if you look at the Chinese data, which I have here also, I'll find the story here, but I think they hit 500 million viewers on Bilibili. I'll get the story here in a second. So, but I'm curious, Olympics conversation, huge results for Worlds, seems to be growing nonstop. Jimmy M, where are you on the sort of league coming to the Olympics kind of conversation?
I think it's really cool. I think it It's really cool. It is the first time like we're seeing an official like a game talking directly to the Olympics. Previously, we had Street Fighter at the Olympics as well, being held adjacently, and it was with the International Olympic Committee, and it was not exactly an Olympic event, but it was tied to the Olympics, and they had like the whole skins, and they had like a world, it was like an Intel-based event happening at the same time, not exactly related. So this is cool. At the same time, I don't know if Riot Games needs the Olympics, because clearly they don't. They live in a virtual world. It doesn't really have this sort of crossover into the Olympics, which I think is very based in physical sport. But hey, if the Olympics want to be involved, why not, right? You saw how huge this was this past weekend. You saw the videos of the Chinese fans out in the streets screaming EDG. Like, it was ridiculous. So I don't see why not.
Yeah, I mean, Jimmy, you bring up a great point, which is, does Riot really need the Olympics? And I'll introduce sort of the third story here. So just a reminder, right? 4 million viewers excluding the Chinese platforms. This is the data that came in. And Billy said they reached a peak of 500 million people. Now, this is such a large number. And this is concurrent, watching at the same time. This is such a large number, I'm almost doubting it. Like, great, it's great for esports, it's great for the gaming industry, but it's such a massive number. Who here has some doubts at the accuracy of this data? I mean, Jimmy B, maybe to you on this.
Always having doubts whenever I see any type of figure coming out of there. But I wanted
unless
to
it's from
YouGov,
point. I don't trust it. That's my rule.
But to your point, Paul, Riot. The Olympics need Riot more than Riot needs the Olympics. So what's interesting about this is, the Olympics putting a lot of faith in such a popular esports title today as opposed to 10 years from now, because they really need that crutch today. That's how I'm reading it. So I don't know. I mean, we have some interesting comments in chat about Rocket League. I wanted to kind of pick your guys' brains as why League. Obviously, the viewership in League is one thing. Let's exclude China for a moment. But, in 10 years from now, are we still going to be seeing League of Legends at the Olympics? Or are they going to be rotating through different esports titles each year? What makes sense here? Because this is a very interesting door that's being opened when you incorporate esports and which esports you choose to incorporate. So, I really just see it as not a desperation play of the Olympics, but definitely like we need to do something, and we need to do it today.
Let me read some of the comments here. Goyo says, that's a huge step for esports. Super cool. Agreed. Chris says, were those numbers really that big though? And then you put these numbers up, Chris. 2021 over 4 million, 2020 3.8 million, 2019 3.9 million. I mean, Chris, you're pointing out that viewership is relatively flat the last 3 years, right? Not a ton of growth. I guess the conversation comes down to, do we believe the Chinese numbers? Because the 500 million, according to Billy, is a 20% year over year increase. The big question becomes, do we believe that Chinese viewership is over 100 times what it is literally everywhere else in the world, right? Not even just North America. That 4 million is everywhere except China. Lindsay, did you have a thought on this?
Total,
Jeff, go ahead.
Is that 4 million total viewers or concurrent? Like
concurrent.
4 million total.
Concurrent.
Okay.
Yeah.
Concurrent.
Okay. What would that equate to? Like, is there anywhere where we?
That was the
like,
peak. Sorry,
viewers?
the peak.
Peak concurrent.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. It seems a bit low, but I don't know. Like,
that one seems low.
Ever. It's the highest ever.
Well, highest ever. Yeah, but it's just, I don't know, 4 million. Like, I wonder, like, I feel like every esports deck has to have like League of Legends World Championship was viewed more than the Super Bowl, and it's like, I have to imagine.
Well, it was, if you count the 500 million in China.
Well, yeah, I guess if we believe that, but I guess, and maybe it's just that I'm comparing apples and oranges, but like if I think of like peak concurrence for the Super Bowl, it's got to be several hundred, over 100 million, I would think. So, I don't know if I'm just not looking at things kind of correctly on a comparison basis, but seems low to me.
So 114 million, I think that's the right number. tuned into the Super Bowl. Actually, hang on, no, 2020
highest ever. Yeah.
2021 was 91.6 million.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's about 90 million.
Yeah,
That's a lot, more than 4.
but again, but
Good job,
also,
Jeff.
also,
What am I missing here? Like that's a lot more.
1/5 the size. If you can't, why are we excluding China? Why are you
I assume
purposely
you're-
excluding
well,
China?
We
Could argue that it was
questioning that
504.
data. I mean, how many people are in China?
Over a billion.
So you're telling me that literally half of the
Okay,
human
no,
beings in
no,
China
no. Hold
watched
on.
this event?
Because
No.
I went through an entire statistics rabbit hole just a second ago thinking about this precise thing. China has almost 1.5 billion people. So that's about 1 out of every 3 people. So it's not that unreasonable. However, they have an extremely skewed age range of their population higher. So I suspect if you exclude the surrounding territories that it was less than 500 million. But if you include all of Southeast Asia, which probably got lumped in a little bit, then it probably was pretty close to 500 million.
Yeah, keep in mind this is. But Lindsay, it's a good point. This is Billy data.
Right.
I don't know if there are people outside of China who would have watched on Billy as opposed to on a.
They're so porous though in certain areas, depending like for the internet, you know.
And to our listeners that aren't watching, Lindsay is wearing glasses, so factor that into how you measure her data there.
I mean, she read the data correct, so.
Go says Rocket League also had a chance at an Olympic adjacent event with Intel World Open, but then COVID. Yeah, Rocket League's another one that seems quite obvious. Neil says the juice is looking dialed in tonight. Neil, great to have you here.
Dialed in.
Maxwell says how does that compare to like the NBA Finals? Let's see what the NBA. So 2021 NBA playoffs overall averaged 4.25 million viewers across all the networks. So seems so if we're trying to compare sport to sport here, would it be fair to say that NBA Finals and League, excluding China, are about the same size audience?
Yeah, that seems accurate. And that's, I mean, if you consider it, there's
One is
every
peak, one
American
is
household
average,
has
so
a
no,
TV.
but it's reasonably fair.
Recently.
Well, and every American household has a TV, but not every American household has a Twitch user at the current moment. Like the number of Twitch users is around 40 million, whereas the number of American households with the TV is significantly higher. So like the barriers to entry for professional sports versus watching League is much different. So considering all of that, 4 million is extremely impressive.
I don't know if there's a barrier to entry to watching Twitch.
There is.
There is.
Jeff, there's
What-
no way you could sit down right now and watch a game of League and have any idea what was
Oh,
happening.
no, 100. Well,
$100.
but that's totally different. That you're talking about addressing the addressable market versus the addressable market would be anyone with an internet connection, correct? Like anyone can
Yeah.
use Twitch.
Fair.
It's still
You need
different,
an
though.
account. No, it's not.
But I guess
How
it's
is it
no.
different?
I mean, it's processing information, right? Like it goes back to the F1 story, right? Like it's ultimately it's putting a ball in a hoop.
Two completely separate things. One is talking about the accessibility of League of Legends. The other is talking about like how many people physically would literally be able to watch League of Legends, like if they wanted to and had the ability to, which I guess would be anyone with a data connection, anyone with an internet connection.
Chris makes another good point here, guys, which is what other pro sport does China celebrate? Their number might be kind of real. I mean,
Basketball.
True. The fact that we're even debating the validity of the Chinese number to me is somewhat problematic, right? The fact that we don't have confidence we may have confidence, but I don't think anyone, raise your hand if anyone on this panel would say 100% you believe the numbers. Not 90%, 100% you believe the numbers. Or anyone in chat, if you guys 100% believe these numbers, right? That creates its own problems, which is if we can't trust the data coming out of, these viewership numbers, how do you sell this then? And does it erode confidence in other esports? Jimmy, I don't know if you have thoughts on that, Jimmy B.
I mean, questioning the data is important, right? And if I don't disagree with you, so I don't have much to offer. If we can't trust in this, then how can we trust in other data that's being put out there? I don't want to get political, but there were other, statistics released from that region with worldly issues very recently, and it's always questions. So I like taking it back to North America, comparing the numbers to the NBA and whatnot. That I thought that was an enlightening conversation, but I have not a lot of interest, having done business over there and trying to get numbers for my own tournaments and programmings to sell sponsorships and other things. I don't have a lot of interest in validating those numbers or applying them to any purpose other than skepticism and amusement.
Yeah, I think it's the size, the absolute size outside of China is encouraging. To Chris's point, it's where do you get explosive growth at some point? Does it, do you get more than the few percentage points growth year over year for League outside of China, or is all the growth happening in China? That would be interesting, I think, to think about and look at. But I want to bring up, pivot a little bit, another League story. So success with the World Championship, but then success also outside of gaming for Riot. And I think this is a particularly interesting story. And the headline here is Arcane reaches the top spot on Netflix in 38 countries. So the newest series, it's this collaboration between Riot and Netflix. Arcane, it debuted as the top series on Netflix in 38 countries. You've had a bunch of streamers. There's this article, League of Legends and Twitch streamers fuel latest Netflix hit. You had a bunch of streamers, including XQC, stream the show live and watch it live on their streams. According to this, Arcane, though, other than Netflix, got 130 million views in China and was the most searched item on Tencent's streaming site on Bilibili. And so, again, it's one of these where it's like the numbers are huge on Netflix. We don't have specific numbers. I couldn't find at least. But we have for China massive viewer numbers, and we know that it's the top series in 38 countries. Anyone surprised that Netflix has been as successful with media and content as it was with the games themselves?
You mean Riot?
Right. Sorry. Riot. Jeff, go ahead.
I think this is important, though. I mean, I think for me, this is a bigger story than the one we did about Worlds. Like, we expect Worlds to be huge every year, break records, set records, have a lot of viewership. For me, if I'm Riot and like thinking about the events, this past month, like this is a way more important milestone and achievement for Riot because it's something different. It brings them a whole new leg to the company. And if you look at kind of some of the prior transmedia projects we've had in the industry, like notably The Witcher success on Netflix, really reinvigorated sales of that game, increased the player base, brought new people in, and did a lot of great things for that franchise. So like if I'm Riot, this is, I don't want to say one's more important than the other, but to me, I think they're probably, if they had, gun to their head, this was a bigger accomplishment by far than the World's success.
Jeff, can I just push a bit? And I'm reading between the lines a little bit of your comment, which is it fair to say, like you brought up The Witcher as another example. Is the success here because of the great Riot IP in your mind and the Riot fan base and the League fan base? Or is it just, do you think the success factor is Netflix here, right? Netflix knows how to make a great series, knows how to produce content that people want to watch, right? And it seems they're the common denominator in at least the two examples here. I'm curious where you ascribe sort of.
So I have to answer this question with a few questions because I don't.
Yeah.
I haven't watched Arcane yet, so I don't know. But also, did Netflix make this? Like, I don't know who actually produced this. Was it internally produced by Riot? Was it a third party?
It was I'm like, from what I've watched, so I watched the entire thing. I watched the pre-show and all that. They didn't speak of anything about like working with Netflix and their production team. It seemed like it was all Riot and Netflix's delivery machine. That's the vibe I got. I could be incorrect in that.
I don't know. All I can tell you is everywhere I've read about it, it says co-created. So read into that as you will. I have a funny feeling Netflix did have some hand in this. I don't think this was delivered to Netflix as sort of a fully baked, here you go, run it. But does that change?
Well, that would change. Yeah, well, because if it was produced clearly, mainly by Riot, then it would be hard to say that this was, Netflix bringing the success. Obviously, they have the pipes, they have the distribution, they have the network, they recommend it to people, stuff like that. So without Netflix, maybe some of this wouldn't be possible. But like, if they didn't actually produce it and create it, then you're gonna have to give the credit to Riot. So hopefully, someone in chat can like Google that and let us know. But I think it's due to the Riot universe, the League universe, the characters, and what they've built. And this opens up new doors for that. And I think, Goyo, I always take a compliment. So I think Goyo had a great point here.
He says, I likes Jeff's take that the show's success is more important, opens the door for a whole new stream of revenue. No question here, right? This is a reason why we're talking about this at the start of the show. But where I'm trying to get at, and it's a little bit shades of Epic Apple kind of fight here, right? Which is, how critical is the delivery mechanism in the success of these things? How critical is the distribution channel in the success of these things? Like, could Riot have been successful with content, with media like this, without Netflix?
100%, I think. You don't think the numbers might have been a little lower just because Netflix has the biggest network, but you don't think if this was on Disney Plus, they would have had maybe 30% less people because Disney Plus is like 30% smaller or whatever the number is than Netflix. But like, there's no way that people were like, I only am watching this because it's on Netflix.
I don't know. I'm curious to get Lindsay's take on this one.
It's more of a Netflix question, streaming question than an esports question. But yeah, I'm curious what everyone else thinks.
Yeah, so this is one where I actually at first thought, no, this would be successful anywhere. But then I think about, I don't know, I still feel like Netflix has a sticking power. Netflix is still the most dominating streaming service. I still feel like if it was on another platform, it might not be as successful. And I still think that the Netflix distribution machine is better than a lot of the other streaming services. And Jeff, I disagree with you. I totally think people would just kind of watch it because it's there. Like, my nephew watches the Skyrim show, and he has no clue what Skyrim is.
There's a Skyrim show?
I think it's Skyrim. I swear
The Witcher?
It's Skyrim. No, it's not The Witcher. It's a kid's show.
Oh, I
Yeah.
didn't even know. Robert, hello. Great to have you here, by the way.
Yes, hi Robert. But he watches it because it's there. Like, he doesn't know what the game is. And I have a feeling like there's a decent culture on Netflix of like sort of off the beaten path type of shows that sort of pop up. And I definitely feel like things like The Witcher could be lumped into that. I think the gaming audience is more powerful, but I do think that there's sort of like an eccentricity factor that people go for with Netflix. I mean, we saw it with like the Great British Baking Show totally taking off in the US when it got put on Netflix. So I still think that there might be like a little bit of magic in the Netflix subscriber base that helped this be successful.
Guys, I have one last. Chris says, by the way, it's the top 10 today. I'd say it was more Riot than Netflix. Yeah, look, what it comes down to, I think, where this gets settled is if Riot can have another hit like this, right? Then maybe it's more clear, right? One maybe a novelty kind of thing.
It's crazy because, like, if you look at IMDb and you're looking at Rotten Tomatoes has 100% right now. IMDb, it's the highest rated Netflix original series ever.
Really?
That's wild.
Ever. More than anything Netflix has ever created. So it's kind of ridiculous.
That is surprising. Now, let me just finish, guys, with one last Riot story here. And I would argue maybe this is even bigger than the first two, or maybe it's a nothing story. But the headline, it's one of this, to me, this one's very binary, and I think everyone's going to fall on one side or the other. The headline here: League of Legends and Valorant are now available in the Epic Games Store, as well as Teamfight Tactics and Legends of Runeterra. So we've had lots of conversation on the podcast about the Epic Games Store. Riot's marquee properties, right? League of Legends and Valorant, and their other games, are coming to the Epic Games Store, are now available actually as of a few days ago, like 4 or 5 days ago. And so what do you guys think? the general question I have for you is, does this now change completely the narrative around the Epic Games Store, or is this a nothing announcement and I'm making a big sort of deal out of nothing here? Jeff, start with you here on this one, because I know you have strong feelings about Epic Games Store.
I feel like you don't believe that this is a big deal, because I know your stance on Epic, and I know you, so I know you don't believe that this is a big deal.
I didn't say that.
I also don't believe this is a big deal, mainly because this isn't going to drive new people. If no one is going to use the Epic Games Store because of this, because they already they're already playing League of Legends elsewhere. Like, I just don't think that this is going to be a new game that's going to drive new installs, on the Epic Games Store. So I would say that it's good. I mean, I don't know what Epic had to give up or whatever to get this. Like, it's good that they have this. If you're Epic and you're trying to create the preeminent game launcher, you want the biggest and best games out there. So, like, it is necessary, but not sufficient by any stretch.
Yeah, I will say that one of the personal frustrations I had was, I always hated that League and Valorant required like sort of their own launcher. Although I would argue Riot did a good job that it was never something clunky. It was never right. It was never its own thing. It wasn't the Riot Launcher that you had to install. Like, you could always just download the games directly, play the games directly. You didn't need a Riot Launcher for anything.
You do now, by the way.
Well, you can still install the games directly, right?
No, there's a Riot Launcher now. As
of
really? Like less
like
than
a week ago?
It's very new. Yeah, it's very new.
Okay, so it's one of these things where I think I agree with you, Jeff, that I don't know if it brings new people to the table. The question is, over time, when I get my next PC, or when I format the hard drive on my current PC, will I bother going to get every individual game from Riot or use the Riot Launcher, or will I just use the Epic Games Store? I don't know. Jimmy Mondel, Jimmy, I don't know if you have a thought on this.
It's nothing announcement. I correct me if I'm wrong. Tencent owns both of them, right? Like, I just think
Tencent owns both of them. Yes,
they're just grouping the properties. So, like, play nice, whatever. Just get over here. They're going to make their metaverse opening in a little bit. They're just setting all that up for later. So I think, like, down the line, they can make all that happen. But for now, they just need to make sure all the properties get into the right storefront, and then they'll figure it out down the road. But for now, nothing.
To Goyo's question here, who here thinks? Yeah, Goyo's question here was just a new option to launch the games. I wonder how much it cost Epic. Who here thinks Epic paid for this, and how much? Jimmy B.
Yeah, I don't have an estimate on how much they paid, but that was my thought exactly too. Was this helps Epic a lot, and to Jimmy Mondel's point, maybe it's a long-term play to just have more under their belt. I don't know, maybe if they have an awesome game down the line that's an Epic exclusive, then you have that one-stop shop where all your other games are too. But in the meantime, it's just another, like, cool. So I have all this in my Epic library that sits, collecting dust, and no one's going to use this. Like, it's a nice statement that Epic was happy to announce, and that Riot was like, yeah, they can carry our stuff when, like, carry my books or whatever. So
is there a world where this goes exclusive, Jimmy?
Where League of Legends and
where you have to use the Epic Games Store?
That would be big.
I would say the opposite. I would say, if anything, this is encouraging that more and more. Well, I don't know, actually, because I didn't know about this Epic launcher that Jimmy mentioned until just now also. Because I was thinking the smart move, like with music, is to make it as widely accessible as possible and to put it on all the game stores where it doesn't matter where you are, you can have it, because you just want these people playing your games, especially if it's free to play. So I was thinking the opposite up until this Riot launcher, which I need to go download after this show today and see what's up.
Chris says drink, because evidently Jimmy M, you dropped an M word there.
I do it for Chris.
All right, guys, that was the 40-minute Riot segment. There's so much Riot news. Let's move on. Talk about Valve a little bit. And it was just the headline here that struck me. And it may be a nothing story, but it may have business implications, I think, for Valve and their esports properties long term. And the headline here is Valve has instructed coaches to not shout or touch their players at PGL Stockholm Major. Now, without, let's not go down any kind of rabbit hole with this. Just to be clear, they're preventing them from yelling at their players, positively or negatively. And the touching that they're really referring to is like they can't fist bump, they can't high five. So there's no physical contact of any kind.
Is this a COVID rule?
No. It's supposedly born out of a sort of a something bad that happened in the CS world where a bunch of coaches were caught cheating because of a spectator bug. This was last year. I think we talked about it even on the live stream at one point where they were exploiting this. I don't know how this addresses that in any way, but there seems to be a lot of blowback. Coaches are unhappy, players are unhappy, and there's a bunch of community backlash. Lindsay, I know you have thoughts on this.
I just don't know how you guys aren't so excited about this, because what the esports world needs is more sterility and even less personality. Because people don't watch sports because of their favorite athlete or their favorite team. No, they don't like that. What they watch it for is the love of the pure game. Nothing extra. No entertainment.
It is a little odd, right? It's a little backwards.
So weird.
Even like high fives and fist bumping, which...
Nope.
They don't even.
All my, no human emotion, no monotone delivery.
Right.
Yeah.
They like their
Really,
their most successful. Right. They like their second most successful esports so much that they, one, don't throw any first party events, and two, you can no longer be happy on stage. Sorry. Enjoy.
Yeah, I don't get the fist pump part. Like that part doesn't make sense. The no coaching part is actually not that crazy. Like that's common in other sports, right? Tennis, you're not allowed to coach. You get penalties for that. NFL, like the quarterbacks have headsets in their helmets, but I think it's like 10 seconds left in the play clock, it turns off. So it's not like the quarterback drops back and the coach is like, throw to the left, like look left, like well, like so that's not that crazy to me. But like the no fist pumping and like high fiving doesn't make much sense. Like that, I don't
throw to the left, look left.
Well, there's a whole conversation around because I think there have been incidents also where coaches have been perceived as being toxic a little bit, right? Yelling at their players. Does anyone feel that this?
The job of a coach is to yell at you.
It's not going to stop the old Albanian man from yelling at his team. It's not going to stop him.
Kids are soft, man.
Yeah.
I'd have my team walk around with rocks in their shoes just to get tough.
That's it. You got to play CSGO with rocks in your shoes. Goyo says, hype coaches are super cool to watch, though. I agree. To me, this is part of the entertainment. And Chris says, please kill golf clap esports. Well, golf clapping probably still allowed because there's no touching between coaches and players there. We're probably okay with that. Goyo says, Valve has done it. Cheating is no more. Yeah. Valve, to me, always makes somewhat questionable moves when it comes to their esports and yet continues to thrive, right? Like, CSGO is not going anywhere anytime soon. It's sort of Dota, obviously not going anywhere anytime soon. It's amazing to me that as much as they've tried to sort of kill their own scene, these games continue to thrive and the scenes continue to thrive. For chat and for you guys in general, whether it's a show of hands or whatever, who thinks Valve backpedals on this literally by next week or 2 weeks or whatever?
Eventually. Yeah.
Lindsay, you think so?
I don't know how fast, but it's like how many, I don't know. How unhappy is everyone going to be if they can't like high five? I just can't imagine a world in which you get in trouble for high fiving.
Now, technically you can high five, you just can't touch. So you could like you could come very close.
I just don't, Valve is like the kind of, let's try that again. Valve is the kind of company that would also just let this be a rule and not say anything about it ever again.
That's
and just
true.
kind of disappear.
That's true.
We might never ever like this might be the last thing we hear for them for the next 6 months. So who really knows?
Anyone ever watch Demolition Man? how that movie has basically predicted the future. If you don't remember, they don't like to touch, so they would high five and do sort of something like this. It was this weird high five without touching.
What's the punishment gonna be? Like no snack time. You have to sit crisscross applesauce.
Sit in the corner. Yeah. Bo says, I give them a week. Yeah, I personally think they backpedal also because the community backlash has been pretty vocal. All right, guys, let's change gears here a bit. I want to talk about a story that is totally relevant because we had them on the podcast, but I thought from a business standpoint, interesting sort of strategic shift here. And I was curious to get sort of everyone's feelings on this. And the headline here is, Immortals relocates headquarters to Great Lakes region, aims to be, and this is the part that struck me, a one of one in attractive, underrepresented region for competitive gaming. We obviously had Jordan Sherman, Ari Siegel from Immortals on the podcast. If you didn't listen to that episode, guys, great episode. Highly recommend you go back and listen to it. But this was the announcement they sort of teased on the podcast, or I think we even discussed it a little bit on the podcast. Jimmy, you were going to say something.
I was going to say we definitely discussed it after the recording.
Oh yeah, I couldn't remember if it made it into the show or if it was after the fact. But it's one of these things where you have an esports, like most esports orgs. Let me just give some context here. Most esports orgs are headquartered basically in LA. In the US at least, and New York to a smaller extent, some in Texas, obviously, but they're pretty clustered, right? You have esports orgs in major cities typically, whether they're in North America or in Europe. This is a totally different strategic kind of move where they're saying we want to go and be the only esports org in this region, the one of one. And we're going to pick a region that there's nothing else there, but we believe is underrepresented and has a bunch of gamers. And so for them, this is the Detroit metropolitan area. I'm curious, Jeff, do you like this strategy?
I want to hear what other people have to say first, because I'm going back and forth. Like
Lindsay. Lindsay, we can, if you want to wait for Lindsay.
Start.
This is interesting because we're still early on enough in the industry where you can make these kind of bold moves and have these theses, and it's not immediately discounted. I mean, this is such a cop-out, but it's like, it's a strategy. I don't know if it's the strategy.
That is a cop-out. That is a cop-out.
Time will tell. I don't know.
Sorry, Lindsay.
No.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Go ahead, Jimmy B.
What makes sense to me, and this is obviously something that we had talked about, was when you look at Los Angeles, for example, you got FaZe Clan, you got TSM, right? You used to have Immortals, you have 100 Thieves, and so many Gen G, all these teams with headquarters there. That if I'm from LA or I'm from California or just the Southwest in general, there's a ton of teams to choose from geographically without regard to talent or what games they play or colors or branding, etc. So what made sense to me was like, yeah, there's esports fans all over the world. And for that new fan, and this is part of that Activision Blizzard kind of Overwatch city branding mentality, but like for that new fan, if I'm just getting into it and there's all these teams to choose from, why wouldn't I root for my hometown the way I do in traditional sports? And so to have your team relocated to an area where you don't have that much competition, where you can attract all those millions of fans and young kids that don't want to root for the LA team or the New York team, I thought that was pretty cool. So, obviously you guys know Jordan's a friend of mine, but I would support this even if he wasn't. I think it's a cool story.
So the question I have, and this is what I was kind of going back and forth in my head. Are they doing this and they're going to brand the teams Detroit, or is this because they want to get employees from Detroit and they think it's like a up and coming tech hub where they can sort of be the dominant? They're the only game in town, if you will. So like they'll theoretically get the best employees.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Paul. I thought it was more of the former because they're actually a fully remote organization now where they're hiring anywhere. So it's more about the brand.
It's more about the fans than the employees.
Yeah.
And I believe that they're branding themselves as the Great Lakes region more so than Detroit. Detroit being one of the spokes of their many,
correct,
of their wheel of fortune, if you want to call it that. Yeah, Jeff, I'm gonna let you finish.
No, I'm still like, it's funny on the podcast. I know they kind of alluded to some interesting, maybe like zigging when other people were zagging, which I respect and I like. My take is kind of a little bit similar to Lindsay's, where it's like, it's a strategy. I don't know that it's the right strategy. Like, I feel like we've spent a lot of time on this podcast talking about, talking bad about some of the leagues that have city based. I know that's not a verb or a word, but have gone that way, because it's like, well, esports is global. The whole beauty of esports is you don't have to be city based. You can have this global brand, this global media base and franchise. And I guess they're kind of planting their flag in the entire Midwest, which is like, decent or Great Lakes region, which is not just one city. But to me, I don't know. Like, to me, it feels like they're running away from maybe like what is a bigger piece of competition, and going kind of hyper local, which could work. Like, to be fair, it could get them a really sort of niche, loyal fan base. But like, to me, this limits the greater potential of being a global media brand.
So I see. I love the insight. I see a natural segue here, and I'm curious, Paul, if you have the Envy OpTic merger queued up for today, because I just see a lot of parallels, which are great counterpoints, I think, to issues you just brought up, but also just something to compare and contrast with. In terms of dominating that region, merging, potentially running away from competition by merging with others. I don't know. There's a lot of similarities here that I want to talk about, if you guys are ready to include that in the conversation.
Yeah, I do want to say something quick before we head over to just, I think there's a couple of other examples we can look at for some sort of reference as to the move that's happening here, right? Immortals, formerly an LA-based organization. I think going hyper-local, as Jeff was mentioning, another organization you can look at is the Susquehanna Sonics, right? Based out of Susquehanna, super small, local. They tried the same thing. Inevitably, that team ended up picking international rosters, dropping the Susquehanna and just going with the Sonics, finding 100x more success. That's one case of it working for them. Other teams have gone hyper local and it's worked for them too. Chili Mountain is very, very, very specific to New York, and they're finding success in the New York community. So it's working for them. It's working for these other organizations. Anbox, they tie themselves to New York, and it works as well. So, I think it brings up a good point in that, like, you can hyper localize, but the localization has to be attractive. You know what I mean? There has to be something to the localization aspect to it. You localize in New York, you're in New York. You localize in the Great Lakes region, you're in the Great Lakes region. Let's make that area attractive. And so I think things like Belong Arenas and in creating more incentives for the Midwest is setting up a good arc for a lot of companies' future success in esports and gaming in the Midwest. But as it stands now, I can't say I have a lot of faith in it. But 5-10 years from now, as we're seeing the infrastructure built out, I can see a long-term strategy working out for them in terms of what they're looking at.
Before we move on, Paul, if I could just make one more. I think, Jimmy, you kind of more eloquently said maybe what I meant to say. Like, I don't think, I'm not trying to, my comment wasn't to say like, oh, wow, I think this is a bad strategy, it's going to fail. I think it does limit them, though, right? Like, they can be successful in that kind of big fish, small pond way, but I think it probably limits them from a bigger perspective. And I do worry, I know Paul's head's going to explode when I say this, but using the authenticity word, it's like, you're an LA-based franchise. Like, is there any lore to why they're moving? Like, I would just love to understand how they're going to execute on this rebrand, what they're going to do to activate the local communities. Because it's like, they're sort of just like moving the team, plopping it down and being like, well, we're now the Great Lakes. Like, one, I feel like a lot of people in the Great Lakes, like people in Detroit, hate people in Chicago. So it's like having one esports team that's like, oh, like I'm a Detroit fan. No, you're a Great Lakes fan. Like, I'm not sure if the people in the region like view themselves that way. So like, I guess I'm curious to see how the execution is. And I don't know enough. I don't want to be very critical because I think, having listened to the podcast, I know, Jordan and Ari are incredibly sharp and like this is a very well thought out strategy. So I'm excited from a business perspective to see how it plays out. But that's just kind of my thoughts quickly.
Yeah, big picture, I like the contrarian strategies in general, right? Like I like when people are going in a different direction from what everyone else is doing. And the reality is it's either going to be spectacularly right or spectacularly wrong, right? Like when you play that contrarian strategy, the outcome tends to be very binary. I think where I agree with it is I never understood why every big esports org has to be in LA, right? Like that never made a whole ton of sense for me. You're in a market that's incredibly expensive. You're in a market.
I agree. But at the same time, like if it was Detroit, like at least Detroit's strong. There's something to it, like New York, you're bold, like whatever it is. Like Florida, you're kind of crazy in the head. The Great Lakes, not sure yet, but
I agree.
They can create that identity, which is cool. I think they can make their own footstep, so that's really cool.
The reality, though, is that everything city-based, while in principle and on paper sounds like it should work, right? Like people have affinity to the city they live in, and so you automatically sort of get fans just because people live in that city. That has sort of not proven out in esports, right? I would argue Anbox failed massively, does not own New York at all, and their org has not done well at all. I would argue the city-based leagues for Activision Blizzard have not done well, and whether that's because of the city-based structure, we can debate that. It's probably not all that. It's definitely not all that. And then even things like G2, right? G2 said they were going to come and own New York. That never happened. Everyone who has sort of tried this has failed or has stalled or has not proven that this hyper-local business model can work. I think what and Jeff, you alluded to this, I think, in one of your answers. Where I love this, though, and I think it's genius, is just in the fight for talent. Why be in an environment like LA where you're competing against 10 other esports orgs for content creators, editors, videographers, talent, like you name it, right? In every category, there's this massive competition for gaming talent. When you could be the cool team in Detroit or in the Great Lakes region, have all the talent to yourself. From a business perspective, I think it's genius. I love it, right? And it's a reason why Canada has a great sort of startup environment, because it's way less competitive than San Francisco, right? If you're going to go do a tech startup. And so I like the idea from a business and people perspective. I think the jury's still out on, can they corner the fan base there and monetize the local fan base effectively enough to build a great esports org? Remains to be seen. I think if anyone can do it, they can, though. Chris says, Maryville University has a great esports college program. Milwaukee has great small orgs, too. Not a bad idea to try and capture that region from a grassroots effort, perhaps. Yeah, I mean, Chris, I think everyone here has sort of agreed that we all love that they're trying something different, at least. Which I think is great. Chris says, too many things to do in NYC, nothing to do in the Great Lakes. Again, less competition, you're right. And we'll see how they activate there and to what success. So that'll be interesting. Let me just bring up the article that Jimmy mentioned, and that is, it's a great sort of segue to this related or next story, and that is another sort of move happening in the esports org world, and that's OpTic Texas confirmed merger of OpTic Gaming and Envy's Call of Duty League team now official. So OpTic and Envy coming together, the two orgs joining forces and are merging. Supposedly this has been in the works since the end of the 2021 Call of Duty season, and the OpTic Chicago and Dallas Empire branding all go away, and it's just going to be OpTic Texas. What do you guys make of this consolidation happening? And particularly, I thought interesting, maybe the side note here, does this mean that Call of Duty League's losing a team? Am I reading this right? Is that part of the implication here also? Jimmy Brada, maybe start with you.
I mean, I know you called this a while ago, right? A lot of consolidation in the market, and what I like about this, as let me slow down a sec. You know, we were just in Texas, the group of us for fun, and I did a little business out there too, meeting with various orgs and companies that we have relationships with in Dallas and in Austin, and for months before the trip even was lining up business opportunities, and I was truly amazed, I think, at all the esports going on in Texas right now in the competitive gaming that we're seeing coming out of that state. So I just wanted to start by saying, we were just talking about the Great Lakes region. We were talking about the Southwest, with particularly Los Angeles, talking about the Northeast, particularly New York. Texas has a lot to offer the esports industry, and I think we're going to see a lot of orgs moving there, a lot of companies moving. We know Tesla's building a factory out there. We're seeing a lot of movement in that direction, and having just been there, it's really cool to kind of see firsthand and be a part of. Directly applying now to the OpTic and the Envy conversation, OpTic is not one of the orgs that I have a personal history with, and also a very loose relationship with people at Envy, where I've definitely had conversations and kind of got a feel for their corporate culture, and like everyone I've met over there, but didn't know enough about no friend that would call me and complain about this or share or give me a heads up on that, where I could offer that kind of insider access or insight. So as a pure fan, reading this, which is an okay position to come from, again, I do love the brand dominance of a specific region. I know we haven't seen it successfully come to fruition, I suppose, from other Call of Duty leagues, and you mentioned Andbox, etc. But I think if someone's going to do it, it's going to be an Immortals, it's going to be an OpTic. And the reason is because these aren't new leagues or new teams coming from the ground up. These are top 5 orgs that are already established, that already have that fan base, and they're not going to lose their existing fans. They're just going to grow more in that one region, right? So, I think Immortals doing it is great. I'm a fan of the Bulls. I'm a fan of the Bucks. I love the Midwest, and I think OpTic is doing it great. And I'm a recent fan of Texas, particularly Formula One in Austin. But yeah, I'll stop yammering on because I want you guys to chime in. But I think this is really cool.
Anyone else have thoughts on consolidation? These are 2 big names, right?
Weak.
Huge names.
Jimmy, why?
Weak.
Why?
Neither of them have relevant enough brands anymore to be one thing. Envy is not one anything.
That's a good take.
That's a good years. Take. OpTic has been so irrelevant. They've had 4 different owners in the past 4 years. Hex growing weed. Nobody cares about the game anymore. It's clear.
Yeah, and it's a great take, and I tend to agree, which is consolidation, I think, is going to come for the orgs that just can't stand on their own 2 feet, right? And I think the realization was both of these orgs, pretty badly mismanaged over the last 4 or 5 years, mismanaged into basically irrelevance, needed each other. And, Jimmy, I guess to you, Jimmy M, does this save them?
No. No, it's far past that. They do, I'm not going to lie to you, their Call of Duty team this year is insane. Shotzi and Illy are the 2 young rookies that came in last year, absolutely tore it up. I'm a huge fan of Illy. He's this young brown kid, just grinds and grinds and grinds. I think their team is stacked. They have an opportunity to win a championship this year. That aside, they haven't won championships for years. This is like a Hail Mary. If their team this year can perform well, they just brand it out the wazoo. They have a resurgence in this Envy OpTic brand. It's going to be amazing. If they don't, they get forgotten. Maybe they try success in Halo Infinite or something else, and that'll be it. I think it's really. I'm not bullish on their success in the future without a championship in Call of Duty, to be honest.
I'm curious if maybe Lindsay or Jimmy M, I'm curious if either of you think part of the problem is just a lack of really something unique about their branding. Like maybe all of this is solved with just taking a real stance on something, right? Like meaning we're going to be the team, because every team seems to sort of have their own thing, right? 100 Thieves has their own thing. FaZe has their own thing. The teams that seem to be doing well are cornering the market in one area, right? 100 Thieves is doing merch up the wazoo. FaZe is doing content. Like, where does Optic and Envy combine sort of pick their spot in your mind? And what is that spot that you think allows them to sort of come out successful after all this? I don't know if either of you have thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think it's still really up to them as to who they want to become. They certainly do have people on both rosters that have built a big following, and they could choose to pursue a content strategy through that. That might be a little bit better of a pivot considering their team performance, as Jimmy noted. If they can pick up the team performance, then maybe they do get back to like a grind-hearted win tournaments type of organization. That seems less likely. But hopefully the merger gives some renewed energy and optimism into like actually picking a strategy.
Exactly. Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, right? It's like, what is the unique factor for it? Back in the day, Hex was Optic. Optic was the green wall. They were this entity. Envy was their enemy. You know, there were storylines, there were things driving it, but that ship has obviously sailed, and we're in a different era of both of these organizations, right? We're in the new generation of esports teams, and FaZe Clan was able to transfer their trick shotting and montages into content creation in this day and age. Envy and Optic clearly have struggled in that regard. And so Envy, their thing was, you envy us, right? We are the best. You're jealous of our performance. They're doing that in maybe, like I see in the comments, in Rocket League. I'm not, too savvy on Rocket League myself, so forgive me if I forgot that. But sure, they're doing well in Rocket League, but right, like any of if you look at the Esports Observer, they obviously do these tiers based on esports impact and how much games weigh in the grand scheme of gaming and the scene. They don't have teams that are performing well in tier 1 impact esports, right? That's what we're really looking at to create shockwaves in legacy history teams like these. They don't have that anymore, right? So how do they create an identity in this day and age? I don't know, but they do have to take a stance, I believe, and I think it'll have to happen soon.
Jimmy B, I saw you shaking your head at some point there. I'm curious. You're muted, by the way.
Sorry about that. I like where the conversation, or where the thought wound up. Because Jimmy M addressed FaZe in a way that I was going to bring up. But to me, esports today is less about winning competitions. It's less about being the best, the most competitive. That's a vehicle to sell merch. It's a vehicle to sell ad time. And so I think media, even though they haven't done it successfully, that doesn't mean it's going to be abandoned. So I still think the play here, if you're an esports team and you need to win a tournament to prove your business, then you're just doing it wrong. That's what we've learned over the last 2-3 years. By them merging, maybe they're trying to find a better avenue towards content creation, towards coaching, towards selling, peripherals. I'm not sure, in dominating that regional market. But I don't see competition as that's part of our core DNA and what we have to do to be an authority in this space anymore. I feel like that's an older way of viewing the industry.
Lindsay, go ahead, and then I'm going to move on. You got the last word here.
A lot of things that a lot of times when we talk about teams, it boils down to 2 things, and that's good management and something of interest. It's like, they can get those, then they'll probably be fine.
It's true. But again, tying it back to the last story, and Jimmy, I think this is why, Jimmy B, why you wanted to tie those 2 stories together, is Immortals is doing something different, right? We can argue, we think it's good or it's bad, but it's at least, it completely separates them from every other esports org. So you cannot confuse them with Envy or Optic or 100 Thieves or, right?
Aren't they doing the exact same thing as Optic and Envy?
Well,
just
no.
in a worse location.
Optic and Envy are just merging. I don't think they've made any comment
the whole
about.
Thing was they were going to own Texas, wasn't that?
Well, they can't, right? There's other
in the article.
There's no one's.
Sorry, I thought that was in.
Complexities in Texas, right? They're definitely not one of one. So
the Colossus, by the way.
I guess I equated it in my head. Someone must have said they were going to own Texas.
Guys, before we move on here, we actually have a very special YouGov Insights segment this week, and I'll tell you why. So first of all, the business of esports, this live stream is supported by YouGov. They're a leading international research firm. They supply the best data on gamers, games, and esports fans around the world. And the very cool thing, really cool actually, is they've recently put out or starting to put out a 3-part global exploration on gaming influencers. Part 1, which is available now for download, and I will put the link in the chat, sizes the gaming influencer global fan base across 17 international markets and reveals where gaming influencer followers sit within the global influencer sector as a whole. Part 2, which actually I think came out today or yesterday, so it's also available for download, digs into the profile and consumer behavior of the gaming influencer audience and unearths what makes them different from those following other influencer types. So part 1 and part 2 are available for download now. I'm going to put the link in the chat, and today we're going to start with part 1. I don't know if we'll get through all of part 1 today because there's a ton of stuff in there. We can probably make 10 YouGov Insight segments out of this. But we're definitely going to do and feature all 3 parts of this research on the live stream. So let's start with, I think, a very kind of fun, easy question to start off with here. And the first thing they looked at was followers. They asked 18 plus in a bunch of different countries if you follow any influencer at all. Okay, so not specific to gaming influencers. I'm curious where you guys think the U.S. ranks in terms of the percentage of 18 plus that follow any influencer at all.
Number 1.
Do you guys think the top of the chart, the bottom of the charts, somewhere in the middle?
Pretty high.
Top 3.
Top half for sure.
And I'm curious in chat what you guys think also, so please feel free to chime in. Let me give you the answer here. The bottom of the chart here, the US, really? Only 29% follow any influencer. This is 18 plus in the US. Interestingly enough, and maybe this comes to, the League of Legends numbers, where we see by far the biggest percentage of people who follow any influencer. UAE number 1, Indonesia, India, China. Those are the top 4. 75, 73, 71, and 64%. The US comparatively less than half at 29%.
Damn.
Which I thought was interesting. The worst, Great Britain, seemingly cares the least about influencers. Jeff, you got a look on your face. I'm curious.
I'm just thinking. I'm thinking in my head. I'm thinking like, did they define? YouGov must have told these people what the definition of what an influencer was, right? Like,
yes.
I'm wondering if it's like people in the U.S. just don't like. They think they're not like the people that they're like. I wouldn't be influenced. Like I couldn't possibly. It's like I'm thinking like how many people in the U.S. follow like Kim Kardashian? Like probably everyone. You know what I mean? Like way more than 29% of the U.S. Like I feel like follows.
There's Kim no Kardashian. Way more than 29% follows Kim Kardashian.
She's got like 1 billion followers.
It would be Kylie if it was anyone. First of all,
even better. I guess maybe I'm thinking like the U.S. people are so arrogant that we don't like think that these people are we're like I'm not being influenced by this person. Like like I follow like Dave Portnoy on social media. That doesn't mean he's influencing me, but like I guess. I would be curious to see what, if you looked at people's actual followers, like what the true number is, because this is clearly people reporting.
It's self-reporting, and there's no reason to be dishonest about this, right?
But I'm not saying they're being dishonest. I think they might be like in their head, they don't realize that they follow influencers. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Let me bring up the second one here because I think the second one's interesting, specific, obviously, for the gaming industry, and that is what type of influencers are the most followed globally. And so I'm curious, again, question for you guys here. Where does gaming fall? Top half, bottom half, or middle?
Now you have me questioning
I know.
my gut on this. I'm going to go with top half again.
I'm going to go top,
double down.
Top 5.
Interestingly enough, in the bottom 4. And what we find is food influencers are the most followed globally with 16%.
That's really not too surprising.
Now, this is relatively much tighter than the previous slide, right? Like 9% for gaming versus 16% for the top one, food. And you notice almost all the middle is around 12 to 10%. So gaming's not, it's a bit misleading in the sense that it's the bottom of the list here, but it's not off in an absolute sense. But food influencers are the most followed globally, and 9% for gaming. Now, gaming does beat social activists, reality TV, and other. So there's that. But I think intuitively, this seems right to me because I feel like there's so much growth yet to be had among gaming influencers specifically. Whereas I think food has had more time. It's more accessible sort of in general, right? Everybody eats. I don't know. Anyone sort of have thoughts on this before I move on to the next one? Chris says, well, this is depressing. Well,
I guess I want to say I'm more surprised that reality TV is lower than I thought it would be, but I'm not really, because I guess the peak of reality TV didn't really align with having influencers, so that makes sense, I suppose. And yeah, I think it's good for the future growth of the industry. Yeah, food, 16%, everybody eats. We've ate for a long time. Everybody knows what they like. So I guess if that's where we have to beat, like, that's a good path to go down, I suppose.
Can I limit? You want the twist here? If they take the same research, okay, but now limit it to men aged 18 to 34, who here thinks food stays on top? Same question, but now instead of limiting to 18
Why
plus.
Why are your questions so hard?
No, I think gaming is higher.
So the interesting part is if you limit to 18 to 34 men, gaming is number one. Again, by a pretty fair margin. Food drops to number 4. Gaming is the highest. So if you're looking to reach men 18 to 34, gaming influencers is where it's at. That's the interesting twist. I thought.
Why the army is all up in esports?
Yeah, and many brands in general, because this is a very lucrative sort of demographic to be going after.
Kind of insane. Number 1 globally.
More than sports influencers, more than music, more than food, more than celebrity. This to me, Chris, I knew this was going to turn around. So hopefully you're much less depressed now, because I think this is a very interesting takeaway. And
sorry, Paul.
Jimmy, go ahead. No,
I wanted to add, I feel like this slide is something that we all kind of knew, but the way we got here by comparing, by zooming out for a second and then filtering down was really insightful for me.
Yeah, and the takeaway is gaming influencers are number 1 if you limit it to men 18 to 34. The other, this was an interesting slide, I thought, just a bit of a pivot here. But we've talked about this, so I don't want to dive too deep into it. But they looked at total hours watched by platform. So looking at the growing demand for live gaming content. And you see an interesting trend here, right? Facebook gaming, YouTube gaming, and Twitch. Anyone sort of have thoughts on this other than Twitch is really running away with the live sort of gaming content market? YouTube gaming probably going in the wrong direction.
Their UI is just not great, man, and they just never improved it. So I'm not that surprised.
Now this is outside China, right? So China may skew things as it does. Jeff, any surprises here for you?
No, I think we covered this a lot last week when we kind of did our weekly bashing of YouTube gaming. So I think a lot of what we said last week still applies. How YouTube is squandering this, what is a pretty massive opportunity. I'm impressed that Facebook is increasing. I don't think that's really the prevailing narrative, and obviously Twitch continues to be dominant, which we most people know that. But the whole market is going up clearly, which is positive.
I have just a couple more slides here, guys. I want to come back to this gaming influencer thing. So remember 18 to 34 men, if we stay in that thought, right? If we now filter even deeper by country, gaming is the top influencer in every country. This is men 18 to 34, except for France, Denmark, Sweden, UAE, and India. And the only one where it's not top 3 is UAE and India, where for men 18 to 34, gaming influencers are not the most popular. Any ideas why in India, which is a big gaming market? Lindsay, do you have thoughts on this one?
That's so interesting because the very first graph you showed had India in the top 4, and now I forget what that graph was for.
No, that's follow any influencer.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
In general.
Yeah. So India's big on health and sports and fitness influencers.
There is, I mean, I suppose there is a really big, I mean, like cricket is huge there. So there's a pretty big sports culture. So that one kind of makes sense as to why it's in the top 3. But when it comes to health and fitness also being there, I suppose I'm a little surprised just because I guess I'm more familiar with people being interested in gaming as a hobby.
Keep in mind, it's still dominant for men 18 to 34. Gaming influencers are still tops in just about every country.
It's just interesting. I would have my point is though I would have guessed in the Indian market that it was a surefire like number 1 or 2. So I'm just surprised to not see it in the top 3, but that just goes to show that I'm not as in tune with the culture as I thought it was. So,
and guys, I'll bring up one last slide here, or maybe 1.5 here. Last slide. We've been talking about 18 to 34. If you look at just U.S. teenagers, the type of influencers that are followed, gaming also does extremely well here. So this is not limited to men. This is men and women. This is teenagers in the U.S. Gaming, the second most important type of influencer, followed by U.S. teens. 36%. Only one that is more dominant is music influencers with 38%. So, this is, for me, when I think about future of the industry and the importance of influencers, these are key trends that I think play into our hand, right? That gaming influencers for the teens that are important now only become more important as they get into that 18 to 34 category. And I have a funny feeling we're going to see that 18 to 34 category, that first slide I showed, shift, or second slide I showed. I think this, at least in the, globally, I think this gaming does increase, does come up this list as the teens age up. So anyways, that's a sneak peek, guys. There's even more in part 1. We may split this up into 4 or 5 segments, but there's a ton of really amazing data. It's a 3-part series, like I mentioned. Part 1 and part 2 you can go download. We will continue part 1, maybe start part 2 next week on the live stream. But we want to thank YouGov for providing us this. Definitely go check them out. Reach out to them if you need data at all on the gaming world, esports world, gamers, fans of gaming and esports in general. Show them some love. They're tremendous supporters of the business of esports, and we really appreciate it. I love the YouGov stuff. It's so much fun because it's like it's eye-opening. It really is. All right, guys, let's talk about Roblox. Come on, Chris, have a bagel. And the headline here is Roblox bookings beat. As gaming boom persists, shares surge. So Roblox shares on November 8th, so 2 days ago, were up nearly 33%. They reported their third quarter earnings. Daily active users grew 31% to 47.3 million during the quarter. Gamers spent 11.2 billion hours on the platform. Bookings surged 28% to 637 million, which was above analyst estimates. In general, everything was up. They beat every expectation, and the stock was way up. Jeff, your thoughts on Roblox? And you're going to lose this bet, right?
I'm not going to lose the bet. What were their DAUs?
Almost 50 million.
Oh my God, Twitter is so much higher. They have 211 million.
But they're not growing 38% or whatever it was.
It was a 2-year bet, and we're like,
they're growing pretty fast. All right, we'll talk about that all the time. No, the numbers were really good. I mean, the stock went up 40% on this. I think that move might be a little overdone, mostly just because of trading mechanics. Actually, 10% of the Roblox shares were sold short heading into the quarter, which is pretty high. For a company that's fairly beloved. So I think this was a bit of short covering. What happened was I think people had thought there was going to be a slowdown as kind of kids went back to school. And then some of the sort of like hedge fund traders had gotten a bit offsides because some of the credit card data and stuff like that. So a lot of these guys follow said that DAUs had actually been growth had been slowing down in October. And obviously, as they reported, growth did not slow down, it accelerated. So, when you see an expectation, when a result comes in wildly different from expectations, that's when you get moves like this, 40% up. I think that it's the 40% move is probably a bit overdone. I think you'll start to see shares come back down a bit, but great quarter, great company, great results.
You don't think there's, with the growth they're having or the growth they're experiencing, that it's not all baked into the stock price right now? There's still more room to
super short term. Over time, sure, the stock will go up. I just mean like in the next month or two. I don't think it's going to go from 100 to 120 or something. It probably goes
Jeff, can I ask a Wall Street analyst specific question here, which is, do you think the street and analysts look at Roblox as the clear metaverse leader, or is it Facebook, or like who are they looking to when they think about metaverse as a theme, right? Is Roblox number one in every conversation there?
I doubt it. I mean, I definitely doubt it. I am sure it comes up a lot. Maybe it should come up even more than it does. I think Facebook has sort of imprinted, pushed themselves into that conversation maybe more than they even deserve to at this point. I think NVIDIA, there was an analyst that just wrote, I think it was Wells Fargo, wrote a big note about NVIDIA being a metaverse play, and the stock went up like 15% this week. That's one I know you've touted a lot, Paul. And Unity. I think people sort of sleep on Unity maybe a bit too much. Unity is a big metaverse kind of winner. So I think maybe even more so than Roblox, in my opinion. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I mean, Unity just also got that Peter Jackson VFX multi-billion-dollar deal that just happened for the metaverse that they were talking about in the actual press release. So I think there's just more to that point that you were making.
I'm curious if you guys think the whole Facebook announcement is playing into Roblox's hands in a lot of ways also, right? Like without the Facebook announcement, would Roblox's stock have been up 40%? Jimmy B, I don't know if you have thoughts, or Jeff, or
Jimmy. You can
I was going to defer to you, Jeff, because I'm loving your takes on this. I think the juice has it.
I mean, I don't. It's hard to say. I don't. I think it was more some of the things I said before. But game. This metaverse trend is clearly, it has been pushed into the like we know about all this because this is what we do. This is what we live and breathe. We talk about it every week. But like, I think if you're an average 50 to 70-year-old investor who works on Wall Street, like, you're not in tune with the metaverse, but like now you are. So I think people probably come with oh wow, this metaverse, this probably is a thing. Like, okay, what are the 5 names that can get me exposure to that? Like Unity, NVIDIA, Facebook, Take-Two, and Roblox. Like, boom, look at all their stocks in the last month. Like, they're all up massively. I didn't say Activision for a very specific reason, but so, it's as simple as that, I think.
Here's the one thing we do know for sure by now: Chris's should be wasted, given all the metaverse, all the metaverse talk. So that's perfect timing, Chris, because we're about ready to wrap up. I have one last topic, one last story, guys, I want to do. And Lindsay, this one's for you because I know you're a Nintendo fan, and the headline here is Nintendo talks about its future and reconfirms next gaming system is coming in 20XX. This is not a mistake. This is actually what they said. And this was an update from Nintendo's president. He said they're going to continue with their integrated hardware software approach, and it's coming in 20XX. Lindsay, So you're going to get a new system
Woo!
sometime this century.
In the next 79 years.
I hope I'm alive for it.
You'll be in the metaverse if anything. Don't worry about it.
You're pretty healthy, Lindsay. I've seen your diet. You'll probably be alive. Maybe.
Jeff loves following me on Instagram for my pictures of vegetables.
No, Lindsay, seriously, what do you make of? Because look, we got Switch OLED, right? For some context, that didn't set the world on fire. And new Xbox, new PlayStation. Nintendo was notoriously slow at releasing new hardware or coming out with new hardware. What do you make of this announcement? Why would they on what? I'm curious, you were in communications. Why would anyone have said 20XX and be on the record for that?
To get all the jackals off their back. Just basically like, hey, we're Nintendo. Stop asking us this. You'll get it when you get it.
That's true.
To be fair to Nintendo, Jimmy B shared a little bit of news earlier that the Steam Deck is also delayed. So I think Nintendo is really just doing exactly what their competitors are doing,
The Steam Deck is delayed 2 months.
Yeah.
This is delayed 2 decades, it looks like.
Yeah, but Nintendo's 2 months is like 2 decades in Nintendo time. So you have to, when you put in the factors that you need to, it's basically the same weight.
When you do the math.
Are we giving Nintendo a little bit of a free pass here? If any other company had said this, right? If Microsoft had said this, if Sony had said this, if literally anyone else, any other gaming company that makes hardware had said this, I mean, we'd be roasting them. Why does Nintendo get a pass?
No, I'm roasting Nintendo too. I'm roasting Nintendo too. Like, don't get me wrong. I roast them all the time. I just know that there's going to be at least 3 other just garbage consoles we're going to get before we get another good one, right? That's what they always do. There's the DS and there's the Super DS and the 3DS and the 3DS XL and the 3DSi. Nobody liked those, but the DS was great. Then there was the Wii U and the whatever the heck else came before that. Then the Wii was great. And then they came out with the Switch. They were like, wait, what if we just take those 2 things and combine them? So now give them 10 more years. They're just going to flop miserably. There will be some awful Nintendo products, and then we'll be revolutionized again. So I'm waiting for that 20-year, 40-year hump.
It'll come with a new Zelda, though, so...
Yes, exactly. It'll be good.
Maybe they learned their lesson. Maybe this is why we get the 20XX. They're going to do no hardware until whatever is next is ready, and if that's in 20 years, so be it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's true, right? They did playing cards. That's what they started with, and they moved to consoles, and then they're going to get rid of the console entirely, and they're going to be like, now you download all your games through the Nintendo web. I don't know. But yeah, who knows? Who knows? I just, like, they're just silly. They're silly for this. Like, everyone wants Switches. We still can't get Switches. Nobody can get consoles, and they're like, oh, yeah, we'll get another one for you guys. 20XX. Like, thanks, guys. Thanks a lot.
To Paul's point, though, and the funniest thing about this is like they get so much lenient. It's not even other hardware companies.
Right.
Any gaming company. Think about like Overwatch 2 and Diablo 4 and all these gaming delays, right? Like we roast all of these for
imagine if Blizzard said that. Like, whoa, my God, the world would have ended.
Yeah, we'd be calling for Bobby Kodak's head.
You already are.
As if we aren't already.
Exactly.
That's the joke, guys. The joke. Okay. Antonio says, 20XX, Nintendo family friendly equals W. Yeah, they definitely get more leniency because it's Nintendo. But it will be interesting to see what year 20XX actually is. Any bets? Or is it this decade? Is it next decade? Is it 2 years? 1 year? When does Nintendo have to come out with a new console to stay relevant?
I'd love to take bets on that. I'm taking 2027.
2027 before any new hardware, like a new console. Wow. Okay.
I'm calling it now.
Yeah, I was gonna say 28, but now I want to say 26 just to be
Just
that.
Paul, not in your head. Don't let him do that, Jimmy.
That's completely
Lindsay?
I'll go 30. They can't be rushed.
No way. Oh, you guys are all out to lunch.
I mean, Nintendo comes out with a new console like every 8 years. So like, why would you think it wouldn't be another? It would be another decade.
Well, how long ago did the Switch come out?
It was like 2018, 17.
I thought it was.
I think like 2023. There's too much pressure for the
That's what I
new.
mean. Yeah, like I mean, I guess it depends if you think like the Switch Pro or whatever was.
Yeah,
No, that doesn't count. Like that doesn't count.
Oh, you mean like completely new?
Yeah, variations don't count.
No, they
I think
don't.
by 2025.
I think Nintendo suffers if it goes that long.
Bets are in.
Chris says, great show. Next week we drink to Web3. My whiskey is expensive.
Also, how Chris is wasted is because he was on his Facebook account before, and now he's on YouTube. He's all over the place.
All right, guys. That wraps up this week's weekly news show. We appreciate everyone who came in, who left comments, who asked questions. Chris, Antonio, Goyo, all you guys, everyone. Robert, everyone who came in, Neil, really appreciate all you guys participating. Lindsay, Jimmy, Jeff, Jimmy, all you guys, thank you as always. Reminder that the podcast this week's really good. The guys from Esports Arena, highly recommend it. Check it out when it drops. We also have a very cool announcement dropping tomorrow. And I will just say, I'm going to tease it. It's more content. It's more, if you love this show, if you love the kind of content we put out, and if you love Lindsay, you love Jimmy, you love Jeff, you love Jimmy, if you love this group, the announcement tomorrow, you guys are really going to appreciate it, I hope. Share it. Tell your friends about it if you like it. And make sure to tell your friends about the live stream, guys. Every week, Wednesday at 8:30 p.m., we love doing it with you guys. So make sure you tell your friends, your colleagues, your family, bring everyone as much as possible. And as always, guys, we will see you next week.